My son tried to have me declared mentally unfit. He did it right after I won a $22 million lottery jackpot. He told a judge that a simple old woman, like me, couldn't possibly manage that kind of fortune. He thought he could seize control of my life and my money. He didn't know that I, a retired tax preparer, had set a trap. He didn't know that when the judge made him my legal guardian, he also became legally responsible for my secret $3 million debt to the IRS. Before I begin, thank you for being here, for being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did. My name is Esther Abbott, and for 70 years, my life was a study in quiet, careful arithmetic. As a retired tax preparer for a small local firm, I understood the world through the language of numbers, of ledgers, of balanced books. My life was a modest one, built on a foundation of prudence and a deep-seated belief that a dollar saved was a dollar earned. My small home was paid for, my pension was stable, and my needs were simple. I found joy not in extravagance, but in the quiet, predictable rhythm of a life well managed. My only son Lawrence had never shared my appreciation for this quiet life. At 45, he was a man who wore his ambition like an ill-fitting suit, always a little too tight, a little too flashy. He worked in wealth management, a term I found deeply ironic as he seemed to have very little wealth of his own to manage. He and his wife, Tiffany, a woman whose self-worth was measured in carats and square footage, lived in a constant, breathless state of trying to keep up with people they could not afford to know. Their life was a performance of affluence, a play I knew was being staged on a mountain of secret debt. I loved my son, of course, but I did not understand him. I saw his frantic social climbing, his desperate need for external validation, and my heart ached for the quiet, happy boy he used to be. My own life changed on a Tuesday afternoon in May. It was a day like any other. I had done my grocery shopping, tended to my small garden, and as was my weekly ritual, I had stopped at the corner store to buy my lottery ticket. I always played the same numbers. My late husband's birthday, my son's birthday, our old house number. It was a foolish little indulgence, a $2 weekly investment in a dream I never actually expected to come true. That night, as I was watching the evening news, the winning numbers flashed across the screen. I looked at them, then at the small, flimsy ticket in my hand. My heart stopped. I looked again. The numbers matched. All of them. A wave of disbelief, so profound it was almost a physical force, washed over me. It couldn't be. It had to be a mistake. With trembling hands, I checked the numbers online. They were the same. The jackpot, the announcer said with a cheerful, booming voice, was a staggering $22 million. And there was only one winning ticket. The days that followed were a blur of shock, of joy, of a quiet, overwhelming sense of unreality. My first thought after the initial dizzying shock had subsided was of my son. This was it. This was the gift I could finally give him. A life free from financial anxiety, a chance to get off the frantic hamster wheel of debt and social climbing, a chance to finally, truly be happy. I called him, my voice trembling with an excitement I couldn't contain. "Lawrence," I'd said, "you're not going to believe this. You need to come over. I have some wonderful news." He and Tiffany arrived that evening, their faces a mixture of curiosity and a faint, familiar annoyance at having been summoned by his simple old mother. I sat them down at my small kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with his homework for years, and I told them. Their reaction was not what I had expected. There was no immediate, joyous celebration. There was a stunned, almost predatory silence. I saw them exchange a look, a quick, almost imperceptible glance that was full of a meaning I couldn't quite decipher. Then the performance began. "Oh, Mom!" Lawrence finally exclaimed, his voice a little too loud, his smile a little too wide. That's incredible. I can't believe it." Tiffany rushed to my side, enveloping me in a hug that felt cold, possessive. "Oh, Esther," she gushed. "A fortune. You must be so overwhelmed. We were so worried about you all alone here, and now this. It's so much for you to handle. Overwhelmed. So much for you to handle." Those were the first seeds of their campaign. They weren't seeing my good fortune. They were seeing my new, profound vulnerability. They saw not a mother to be celebrated, but an asset to be managed. The next day the gaslighting began in earnest. They insisted on helping me. They brought over a new complicated, smart television, a device with a dozen remotes and a user interface designed by a sadist. When I fumbled with it, my librarian's mind struggling to keep up with the illogical menus, Tiffany would sigh with a dramatic, pitying patience. "See, Lawrence," she'd say loud enough for me to hear. "This is what I mean. She's not equipped for this new world." They would document my lapses. My forgetting the name of a distant cousin. My misplacing my reading glasses. Each small, normal sign of aging was now entered into a mental ledger they were building against me, a case file for my own incompetence. I felt a growing sense of unease, a chilling premonition. My beautiful, life-altering dream was in their hands, beginning to feel like a nightmare. They were not celebrating with me. They were circling me like patient, smiling vultures, their eyes fixed not on me, their mother, but on the $22 million prize they had already decided was theirs. The joy of my win was being systematically, cruelly, replaced by the terror of what my own son was about to do to me. The week following my lottery win was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a quiet, insidious campaign designed to dismantle my confidence and frame me as a confused, incompetent old woman who couldn't possibly be trusted with her own fortune. My son Lawrence and his wife Tiffany were the architects of this campaign, their every action cloaked in the suffocating blanket of their loving concern. They insisted on being present for my meeting with the lottery officials, their hands on my shoulders, guiding me as if I were a fragile, bewildered child. "We're just here to make sure no one takes advantage of you, Mom," Lawrence had said, his voice full of a false, protective warmth that made my skin crawl. He had, of course, already hired a team of expensive lawyers and financial advisors. His lawyers, his advisors, to manage my winnings, all under the guise of protecting me from predators. The irony I was beginning to realize was that the most dangerous predators were standing right beside me. Their gaslighting was relentless, a steady, corrosive drip of doubt and condescension. They would help me with my new online banking portal, a system I, a retired tax preparer, could have navigated in my sleep. They would stand over my shoulder, pointing, sighing with theatrical patience. "No, Mom, not that button. The other one. It's so confusing, isn't it? It's a good thing we're here to help." They began to document my lapses in a small black notebook that Tiffany now carried with her everywhere. It was a grotesque performance. If I misplaced my keys, she would make a quiet, deliberate note. Monday, 10:15 a.m. Mother misplaced her house keys again. Seemed very agitated. If I struggled to remember the name of an actor in an old movie, she would scribble, Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Significant short-term memory lapse. Unable to recall a common name. They were building a case against my mind, using the normal everyday forgetfulness of a 70-year-old woman as evidence of a profound cognitive decline. They were twisting my reality, creating a narrative of my incompetence that they could then present as fact. The most painful part was how they began to isolate me. Old friends would call and Tiffany would answer my phone. "Oh, she's not up for a chat right now," she'd say, her voice full of a sad, sweet sympathy. "She's having one of her foggy days. We're trying to keep her calm." She was painting me as a senile recluse to the very people who knew me best, cutting me off from my support system, ensuring that her and Lawrence's narrative would be the only one the world heard. The ultimate betrayal, the final devastating move in their cruel chess game, came about a month after my win. I had just returned from a quiet walk when I found a formal-looking envelope in my mailbox. It was from the county courthouse. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a conservatorship petition, filed by my son Lawrence Abbott. I read the words, my vision blurring, my heart a cold, dead weight in my chest. It was all there in stark, unforgiving legal language. All their lies, all their manipulations, all their manufactured evidence, now codified in a legal document designed to strip me of my autonomy, my dignity, my very personhood. The petition claimed that I, Esther Abbott, due to a recent and rapid cognitive decline, was now mentally unfit to manage my own financial affairs. It cited my confusion with new technology, my memory lapses, my agitation. It argued that my new staggering fortune of $22 million made me a prime target for financial predators, and that it was their loving filial duty to intervene. It requested that the court appoint my son Lawrence, a respected financial professional, as the sole legal guardian and conservator of my estate, to protect me from myself. It was a declaration of war. A legal attempt to have me declared a non-person, a child in the eyes of the law, so they could get their greedy hands on my money. The son I had raised, the man I had loved, was trying to legally erase me. The heartbreak was a physical thing, a crushing pressure in my chest. For a moment I almost succumbed to it. I almost believed their lies. Maybe I was confused. Maybe I was losing my mind. The gaslighting had been so effective, so relentless, that I had begun to question my own reality. But then as I stared at the cold, cruel words on the page, something else began to surface. A flicker of the old Esther, the tax preparer, the woman who understood rules and numbers and systems. The woman who knew a fraudulent claim when she saw one. And this petition was the most fraudulent claim I had ever seen. My grief, my fear, my self-doubt, they were all burned away by a sudden white-hot and deeply clarifying rage. They thought I was a simple old woman who had just gotten lucky. They thought my mind was a liability. They had no idea that my mind, the mind of a woman who had spent a lifetime navigating the complex, unforgiving world of the IRS, was about to become their worst nightmare. They wanted a legal battle. They wanted to talk about finances, about liabilities, about who was fit to manage what. Oh, I would give them a battle. I would give them a lesson in liabilities they would never forget. The game was on. And I, the unfit mother, was about to set a trap so perfect, so ironic, so devastating that they would never see it coming. The court filing was a devastating blow, but it was also a gift. It was a declaration of their intentions, a clear, unambiguous statement of their greed. And it was a profound tactical error on their part. They had moved the battle from the quiet, emotionally manipulative arena of my home to the cold, logical, evidence-based arena of a courtroom. They had chosen to fight me on my home turf. My heartbreak, which had been a heavy, suffocating fog, transformed into a cold, strategic fury. I was no longer a grieving, confused mother. I was Esther Abbott, retired tax preparer, a woman who had spent 40 years finding the loopholes, the discrepancies, the hidden liabilities in other people's financial lives. Now I would do it for my own. My first call was not to a psychologist to defend my sanity, but to the sharpest estate lawyer in the city, a woman named Diana Warren. I had known of her for years, a legal shark with a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and having a particular passion for complex financial cases. I sat in her elegant office, the conservatorship petition on the table between us, and I laid out my story. I told her about the lottery win, about my son's and his wife's sudden cloying concern, about their campaign of gaslighting. She listened, her intelligent eyes sharp, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "They have underestimated you, Mrs. Abbott," she finally said, a slow, dangerous smile on her lips. "Profoundly. They have," I agreed. "And I intend to make them regret it. But not in the way they expect. I don't just want to defend against their petition, Ms. Warren. I want to set a trap. A trap so perfect, so ironic that they will walk into it willingly, even eagerly." And then I laid out my plan. The plan that had been forming in my mind in the cold, clear light of my righteous fury. The plan of a tax preparer. "My son believes I am a simple woman, overwhelmed by a sudden fortune," I explained. "He sees only the asset, the $22 million. He does not see the liabilities. We are going to create a liability for him. A massive, terrifying, and completely fabricated one." Diana's eyes widened, a flicker of delighted comprehension in their depths. "Go on," she said. "My late husband," I continued, "was a wonderful man, but he was a terrible businessman. He had a small construction company that failed years ago. Fact, my son knows. What my son doesn't know is that I have just discovered a box of my husband's old business records. Records that show the business didn't just fail. It failed with a massive unresolved tax debt to the IRS. A debt of, let's say, $3 million. Diana leaned forward, her smile now a full-blown, predatory grin. "A phantom debt," she whispered, savoring the words. "Precisely," I said. "A phantom debt supported by a masterpiece of fabricated documentation. Old, backdated letters from the IRS with escalating, threatening language. Liens on non-existent properties. A complete, terrifying, and utterly believable paper trail of a tax nightmare that has been dormant for years, just waiting for a new asset to attach itself to." I looked at her, my own eyes gleaming with a cold, hard light. I was a tax preparer for 40 years, Ms. Warren. I know how to make a paper trail look real. I know the forms, the language, the letterhead. I can create a ghost that will haunt my sons every waking moment. Our strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We would not contest the conservatorship too vigorously. We would allow them to believe they were winning. We would let the court see a confused old woman, a concerned son, and we would let the judge do exactly what they wanted him to do, grant my son guardianship over my estate. Because, I concluded, the moment that gavel falls, the moment he is declared my legal guardian, he is no longer just the heir to my $22 million fortune. He is also the sole legal entity responsible for settling my $3 million debt to the Internal Revenue Service. Diane Warren let out a low, appreciative laugh. "Oh, Esther," she said, shaking her head in admiration, "you are a truly wicked woman, and I am going to have an absolute blast with this case." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of quiet, meticulous creation. I spent my days in my home office, surrounded by old tax forms, yellowed legal paper, and my own deep, satisfying knowledge of the bureaucratic machine. I became a forger, an artist of deceit, creating a fictional financial history so complex, so detailed, so utterly terrifying, that it would be completely believable. I created fake letters from the IRS, using the correct logos and language, their tone escalating from polite inquiry to threatening legal action. I created fake lien notices, fake audit reports, a complete multi-year narrative of a tax debt that had spiraled out of control. It was my life's greatest work. A masterpiece of fiction, built on a foundation of truth, the truth of my son's own monstrous greed. The trap was set. The bait, my $22 million fortune, was irresistible. And my son, so blinded by his own arrogance, so certain of my incompetence, was about to walk right into it, eagerly, triumphantly, and with no idea that the prize he was about to seize was attached to a nightmare of his own making. The day of the conservatorship hearing, I played the part of the confused, frail old woman to perfection. I allowed my lawyer, Diana Warren, to help me into the courtroom, my movements slow, my gaze distant. I wore a simple, slightly dated dress, a stark contrast to my son Lawrence's expensive, tailored suit and his wife Tiffany's glittering jewelry. They looked like predators circling their weakened prey. They had no idea the prey was leading them directly into a cage. Their lawyer, a slick man with a voice as smooth as oil, presented their case with a performance of deep, sorrowful concern. He painted a picture of a loving son, a respected financial professional, forced to take this heartbreaking but necessary step to protect his beloved but tragically declining mother. He presented their notebook of my lapses as evidence. He spoke of my confusion with my new television, my inability to manage my own online banking. "Your Honor," he concluded with a dramatic sigh, "my client, Mr. Abbott, is not here today out of greed. He is here out of love. He simply wants to ensure his mother's historic, life-altering good fortune is managed responsibly, to protect her from the predators who would surely take advantage of a woman in her vulnerable state." When it was Diana's turn, she did not, as they expected, launch a furious counterattack. She was calm, reasonable, almost compliant. "Your Honor," she began, her voice full of a quiet, professional respect, "my client, Mrs. Abbott, does not deny that she has been feeling overwhelmed since her lottery win. It is a staggering amount of money for anyone to manage, let alone a 70-year-old widow living a quiet life." I saw the look of triumphant surprise on Lawrence's face. He exchanged a smug, victorious glance with Tiffany. They thought I was surrendering. "My client's primary concern," Diana continued, "is not about control. It is about responsibility. She wants to ensure that whoever manages her estate is prepared to handle all of its complexities. Not just the assets but also," she paused, letting the word hang in the air, "the liabilities." The judge, a man with a kind but weary face who had clearly seen his share of messy family disputes, looked at her with interest. "Liabilities, counselor?" "Yes, Your Honor," Diana said. "Mrs. Abbott's late husband, a man of great vision but sadly poor business acumen, left behind a rather complicated financial legacy. There are outstanding matters that need to be resolved. My client's only condition for this conservatorship is that the court affirm that the appointed guardian will assume full, legal responsibility for managing the entirety of her estate, its assets and its significant outstanding debts. It was a brilliant move. It sounded perfectly reasonable, responsible even. Lawrence's lawyer, seeing no threat, readily agreed. "Of course, Your Honor," he said magnanimously. "My client is prepared to assume full fiduciary responsibility for his mother's complete financial picture." The judge, seeing a seemingly concerned son, a reasonable request and a confused but agreeable mother, made his decision. "Very well," he said. "Based on the evidence presented of Mrs. Abbott's recent cognitive challenges, and with the consent of her own counsel, this court finds that a temporary conservatorship is indeed in her best interest. I hereby appoint Mr. Lawrence Abbott as the legal guardian and conservator of the estate of Mrs. Esther Abbott, with full fiduciary responsibility for all its assets and liabilities." He banged his gavel. It was done. A wide, triumphant smirk spread across Lawrence's face. He had won. He had won it all. He now had legal control over $22 million. He leaned over and whispered something to Tiffany, who gave a small, delighted squeal. They were already spending the money in their minds. They stood, ready to leave, ready to begin their new life as the controllers of a vast fortune. But Diana Warren stood as well. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm, clear, and suddenly imbued with a new, sharp authority. "There is one final matter for the court's attention." The judge, looking slightly annoyed at the delay, said, "What is it, counselor?" "Now that my client's new guardian is in place," Diana said, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom, "we must, as a matter of legal urgency, address her single largest liability." She lifted a thick, heavy binder from her briefcase and placed it on the table with a resounding thud. "I am submitting to the court," she announced, "the complete file on Mrs. Abbott's outstanding, unresolved $3 million tax debt to the Internal Revenue Service." The smirk on my son's face vanished, replaced by a look of pure, baffled horror. The trap had been sprung. And his greedy, triumphant victory had just turned into his worst possible nightmare. The moment Diane Warren uttered the words $3 million tax debt to the Internal Revenue Service, a profound, shocked silence fell over the courtroom. The air, which had been filled with my son's smug, triumphant energy just moments before, was suddenly thick with a new, terrifying tension. Lawrence stared at the thick, intimidating binder on his lawyer's table as if it were a venomous snake. "Objection, Your Honor," his lawyer, Mr. Davenport, finally stammered, scrambling to his feet. This is the first we are hearing of any such liability. This is an ambush." The judge looked down at him, his expression one of weary annoyance. "Counselor," he said, his voice dry, "you are the one who just on behalf of your client eagerly accepted full fiduciary responsibility for all of Mrs. Abbott's financial matters, including any and all outstanding liabilities. Is that not correct?" Davenport's face went pale. He had been so focused on the prize, on the $22 million, that he had walked his client right into a legal snare of his own making. "Well, yes, Your Honor, but nothing," the judge said, his patience clearly gone. He turned to my lawyer. "Ms. Warren, please present the documentation." What followed was a masterpiece of legal theater. Diane calmly, methodically, walked the court through the contents of the binder, the one I had so carefully, so lovingly fabricated. She presented the backdated, official-looking letters from the IRS, their tone escalating from polite inquiry to threatening notices of intent to levy. She presented the fake lien notices against my late husband's failed business. She presented the complex, confusing, but utterly believable paper trail of a tax nightmare that had been festering for years. "As you can see, Your Honor," Diane concluded, "this is a significant and complex liability that requires immediate and expert attention. My client, in her confused state, was simply unable to manage it. But now, thankfully," she added, turning to look at my son with a smile of pure, vicious sweetness, "she has a respected financial professional as her legal guardian to handle it for her." Lawrence's face was a mask of ashen, horrified disbelief. The $22 million jackpot he had just won had, in an instant, been transformed into a $19 million prize, attached to a terrifying $3 million war with the most feared financial institution on the planet. And he, as my legal guardian, was now solely responsible for fighting it. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading panic. He was searching for a sign, any sign that this was a joke, a misunderstanding. I just looked back at him, my expression one of faint, grandmotherly confusion, the very role he had assigned to me. The hearing was concluded. The conservatorship was in place. My son Lawrence Abbott was now the proud legal guardian of my entire estate. And my entire estate now included a phantom multi-million-dollar debt to the IRS. The aftermath was immediate and catastrophic for him. The court, taking the IRS debt very seriously, placed an immediate freeze on a significant portion of my lottery winnings, earmarking them for the potential tax liability, pending a full investigation. The free-flowing river of cash Lawrence and Tiffany had been so eagerly anticipating was reduced to a mere trickle. And Lawrence was now trapped in a bureaucratic hell of his own making. He was legally obligated to deal with this debt. He couldn't ignore it. To do so would be a breach of his fiduciary duty, a crime that could land him in actual prison. He was forced to hire a new team of lawyers, not the slick divorce attorneys he was used to, but expensive, specialized tax attorneys who charged by the minute. He had to engage forensic accountants to try and unravel the complex, fictional mess I had created. His life became a nightmare of paperwork, of threatening, though fake, letters from the IRS that my lawyer would discover and forward to him, of endless, stressful meetings with accountants who couldn't make sense of a financial history that had never actually happened. The stress and the financial drain destroyed him. His marriage to Tiffany, a union built on the promise of a lavish, carefree future, imploded under the weight of this new, terrifying reality. She had not signed up to be the wife of a man at war with the IRS. She left him, taking with her what little she could. Her dreams of a life of luxury turned to dust. For months, I watched from a quiet distance as my son, the man who had tried to steal my fortune by declaring me unfit, was systematically ruined by the very responsibility he had so greedily craved. He was forced to sell his fancy car to move out of his oversized house, his life a testament to the old adage, "Be careful what you wish for." My revenge was not a loud, angry confrontation. It was a quiet, insidious, and perfectly legal unraveling. I had given him exactly what he wanted: control. And with that control came a burden so immense, so complex, so utterly terrifying that it crushed him. He had tried to put me in a cage. He had instead locked himself in one. The bureaucratic nightmare I had so meticulously crafted for my son Lawrence, ground on for 6 long, agonizing months. His life, which had once been a performance of effortless success, was now a grim reality of legal bills, frantic phone calls with accountants, and the constant, terrifying specter of the IRS. The $22 million fortune he had so eagerly seized control of was now a source not of joy, but of immense, paralyzing stress. He was, as my lawyer Diana Warren so aptly put it, asset-rich and peace-poor. During this time I, on the other hand, was quietly, methodically reclaiming my own life. With the court's permission, facilitated by Diana, I underwent a new, comprehensive series of evaluations by my own trusted team of doctors. Unsurprisingly, with my system now free of the special vitamins my daughter-in-law had been providing, my cognitive tests came back with flying colors. My memory was sharp, my reasoning clear. My senility, it turned out, had miraculously vanished. Armed with these new medical reports, Diana filed a motion with the court to have the conservatorship dissolved. Lawrence, now a broken, exhausted man on the brink of a nervous breakdown, did not even contest it. He was, I think, desperate to be free of the $3 million monster that was haunting his every waking moment. The judge, the same weary-eyed man who had granted the initial petition, reviewed the new evidence with a look of dawning, angry comprehension. He looked at my new, glowing medical reports. He looked at the mountain of legal and accounting bills Lawrence had accrued in his management of my estate. And he looked at Lawrence, at the hollowed-out shell of the confident man who had stood before him just 6 months prior. He dissolved the conservatorship immediately, his voice ringing with a cold, judicial fury. "Mr. Abbott," he said, his gaze like a physical blow, "you came before this court feigning concern for your mother's well-being. It is now abundantly clear that your only concern was for her money. You have wasted this court's time, and you have squandered a significant portion of your mother's fortune on a wild goose chase born of your own greed. This is a profound abuse of the system and of your mother's trust. I find your actions to be reprehensible." I walked out of that courtroom a free woman, in full, unassailable control of my life and my fortune once more. Lawrence was left to deal with the legal and financial mess he had inherited. The expensive tax lawyers he had hired, of course, eventually discovered the truth, that the $3 million IRS debt was a phantom, a masterful, intricate fabrication. But the discovery brought him no relief. He had already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of my money, and his own, in his frantic attempts to fight it. He was financially ruined, his reputation in the wealth management community destroyed beyond repair. And his wife, Tiffany, was long gone, having filed for divorce the moment the first massive legal bill arrived. My revenge was complete. But I had one final quiet act to perform. A few weeks later, I sat in the sun-drenched living room of my new, beautiful and very secure condominium, a place I had bought with my winnings. I took out a simple, elegant postcard. On the front was a picture of a magnificent white cruise ship, sailing on a turquoise sea. It was a postcard from the Grand World Voyage, a 3-month all-expenses-paid first-class cruise that I had booked for myself the day the conservatorship was officially dissolved. I wrote a simple message on the back. "Dearest Lawrence," it read. "Having a wonderful time. The weather is beautiful and the peace and quiet is divine. Hope your audit goes well." I signed it with a small final flourish. "Love, Mom." I mailed the postcard from my first port of call in the Caribbean. I pictured him receiving it, this small, cheerful dispatch from my new life of freedom and luxury. I pictured his face as he read my words, as he realized that while he was left to pick through the rubble of the life he had tried to steal, I, his unfit, confused old mother, was sailing away into the sunset, without a single care in the world. He had tried to take my fortune, my mind, my freedom. He had failed. And I, in the end, had taken something far more valuable from him. The arrogant, unshakable belief that he was the smartest person in the room. My final lesson, delivered from the deck of a cruise ship, was a simple one. Never, ever underestimate a quiet old woman with a knowledge of the tax code and a deep, abiding and very strategic love for poetic justice.